You might see a cow flying by behind me here in just a moment. It is blowing like 35 down here in Florida. So before we go into the video today, on top of that, you're also going to be able to answer one very important question that a lot of you bring to the table, and that is, should I ever pull my... I told you it was blowing like 30 out here. Only took me a little bit of time, but it looks like we finally solved that problem now, huh? We are back. Video number 2, slot impact release drill. Let's go. For those of you that sat through video number 1 that I'm putting up on the screen right now, today is what I call graduation day, because if you follow this plan to a T and you've put in the legwork, you've done all of those repetitions that I asked you to do in video number 1, you laid down the foundation, every single one of you is going to leave today's video moving the club in space in full swing territory, and you're going to be able to start working towards a golf swing that's got a perfect balance of speed and control. And you're going to be able to answer that one very important question that I'm asked all of the time as a golf instructor. Is the golf swing a lead side or trail side dominant sport? I get that question all of the time, and my answer back to that question is the exact same way every single time I get that question. How I answer it is that it's very player dependent. It's very dependent on the golf DNA that you have brought to the table. When it comes to my golf DNA, I like to use both sides of my body to be able to produce my power and speed in the swing shape. I prefer to use my lead arm and lead wrist as the control aspect in the swing shape, but there are many circumstances in a round of golf where I'll use my trail hand and arm to help influence that. An example, if I'm trying to hit a trap draw or a trap cut, or maybe I'm around the green and I'm trying to open the club face up, a lot of that influence comes from my trail hand. You want to be able to use your entire body in the swing shape to build an efficient golf swing. You want to build an efficient golf swing that's got control in it. How you build that swing shape is very dependent on who you are as a golfer. So you're going to be able to answer that question when today's video is all said and done. But more importantly, you're going to be able to understand exactly how to move in the downswing sequence perfectly so that you have your legs and your hips and your arms working in unison, and you have better club face management, and you can move the golf club in space with a whole lot more zip. You ready to get started? Of course you are. Let's get started. Okay, so there are going to be 3 main components to today's drill, and each one of these components can be worked on at separate times, but the end goal is to get these 3 components married together and turn it into a full swing shape. Now, the 3 components are going to be sit, drop, and pull. I want you to remember those 3 words right there: sit, drop, and pull. What we're going to work on is we're going to work on making sure that your transition is perfect from the top of your golf swing, and making sure that your hands and your arms are synced up with what your legs and your hips are supposed to be doing. That's the first step in this process. In fact, the most important step in the transitional phase of the golf swing is getting our weight transferred. Let's listen to one of the best players in the world, what he says about transferring weight.
Obviously, I've turned into my right side, into my right hip. And then once I'm at the top, I mean, it really is it's a shift onto my left side. I try to get all that weight onto my left side as quickly as I possibly can. Yeah. You know, so from here, to bump to my left side, I sort of pressure into the ground so that, you know.
Did you just hear that? He actively thinks about shifting his weight onto his lead side. It's not just a 125-mile-an-hour swing pulling him over there. Imagine that. We know that when it comes to being able to produce club head speed, to get this thing going as fast as we possibly can, is we need to increase the speed in which our hands are moving in the swing shape. Think about this analogy here for a second. If I were to take my lead hand and arm and just swing it back and forth without any sort of tension, just rocking it back and forth, and I wanted this arm to go faster, but I wanted to do it without being tense, how would I make it go faster? Well, I would start adding some weight shift and some body turn. I could even add a little bit of ground force. All of those movements are going to help speed up the hands and the arms. Now, that one pressing question that a lot of you ask, is it okay to have some pull of the lead hand and arm down through the hitting area up into finish? Of course it is. It's just when that happens. You don't want to start pulling the hands and the arms from the top of the swing down. You need to allow the transitional phase of the swing to take shape before the pull starts to happen. So what you're going to learn here today is that position that I taught you to work from last week is virtually the position where you're going to start turning the afterburners on, and you're going to start to feel the lead arm and the lead hip pulling through the hitting area so that you can produce the speeds in which you've been looking for all along. Okay, so before we jump into the fun part of today's drill, I actually want to show you an example with what my golf swing does and how my wrists change very dynamically in the swing shape without me trying to put a lot of big active influence in them. And I brought out a device we call Hack Motion, And I have been testing the daylights out of this thing for like the last 5 or 6 weeks, and I've still got quite a bit more testing to do with it before I put my seal of approval on it. But what this thing does is it allows us to see our wrist functions in space, right? We can see how much extension I have versus flexion, how much deviation I have, radial versus ulnar, and how much supination and pronation are actually taking place during the entire swing shape, which is great. That data is fantastic to have, but it's how you use that data to your advantage that can either make or break your golf swing, right? What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna hit a stock shot, and I'm gonna try to hit a golf ball that goes dead straight. And I want you to actually look at the data with me very closely to see what my wrist did in the swing shape. So let's go ahead and hit a good one out of the middle of the club face here, hopefully. Okay, ball flew perfectly straight. I thinned it just a fraction, but that was a really good strike, or a really good ball flight, I should say. Okay, here is a perfect example. And I'll show you on camera now. Okay. My wrist started with 16 degrees of cupping. So based on my grip, I started with 16 degrees of extension in my wrist. As I started my takeaway and my backswing, up to the top of my golf swing, my wrist went from 16 degrees of extension to 11 degrees of flexion. And then in transition, in the downswing, at some point, before the point of contact, that flexion increased, and at the point of contact, I was 24 degrees in flexion at the point of contact. Think about that for a second. Do you think that I actively tried to take my wrist and bow it on the way down in that short period of time to be able to make that shot fly the way that it did? Absolutely not. What actually happened in the golf swing is that as my wrist and my forearm started to rotate up to the top of the swing, momentum and inertia was working behind my body, and that started to pull my wrist more into that bowed position. And as I'm changing the direction and the club's still staying back in behind my body, it increased it for me. Now, that's not great news for a player of my sort of nature that uses a lot of supination in my wrists and my forearms down there, because we know that that bowing movement actually shuts the club face down. So I would have to be very careful on the way through to be able to fully let the club release if the club face comes in shut. That's, again, this is how you need to look at the golf swing, is that it's very much a balancing act. My wrist and forearm rotation that I have down in front of my body was maybe considered a timing variable at one point in my golf swing, but I've been able to remove the timing by practicing things properly. If you don't get the results that you're looking for in today's video, then there's a pretty good chance that you have a function that's taking place early on in your takeaway or your backswing, or you're trying to get command of the golf club too early at the top of the golf swing and trying to get the club back out in front of you. What I mean is that a lot of you at home don't like to have the club's center of gravity back in behind your hands. You're constantly trying to get the club back out in front. That's why this term shallowing the golf club is so in vogue right now, when in fact shallowing the golf club is super, super easy. It's just function of the hands and the arms on the way down, doing as little as possible. That little input that we worked on in video number 1 is still going to stay in place, but you're going to do that as you start to make that good initial shift onto the lead side that I'm going to teach you in step number 1 of today's video. So how we're going to start out, though, is we're going to be working on the sit and drop aspect first. So I like to go ahead and get myself set up with the golf ball being present. Again, we're training our subconscious that these new movements are here to stay. And very much like we did in video number 1, we're going to go ahead and elevate the club head so the club shaft is parallel to the ground. We're going to set the trail wrist ever so slightly, keeping the club shaft parallel to the ground. Okay, so it's just pointed outside my lead thigh now. Now I'm going to shift, and I'm going to make a big turn up to the top of my backswing. And exactly what I thought is the phone is telling me that I'm in 1 degree of extension at the top of my golf swing. I want you to keep your hands and your arms in the position that you feel right now, and we're going to shake out that tension here in just a second. Okay, so up at the top, what I want to do is I want to teach you how to lower your arms first. So I just want you to bring your hands and your arms straight down towards your trail pocket. That movement right there, coupled back with a sit movement onto your lead side, is the whole first part of the drill. Now, the checkpoints that you're going to look for are going to be in a very specific order. If you do this drill right, what you're going to look for to know if you did the sit and drop right is that you should have about 80 to 90% of your weight parked underneath your lead ankle. Your hips and knees should have gone from a closed position back to a square position. 80 to 90% back to a square position. your arms will have dropped down to where their hands are right around belt height. If they're a little bit higher, a little bit lower, totally fine. But what it will look like from a down the line perspective, if you do this right, is that when you squat or sit and come back to a square position, is that that club shaft should be right through the forearm. That would be that slotted position that I had you preset. Now you can kind of see how I'm bringing this all together. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start out the drill by doing some isolated reps here, getting comfortable with the sit and drop movement. Once we start getting comfortable with that, we're going to add in that little input on the way down and we're going to start making some swings. Then once we get all of that stuff in a good spot, we're going to introduce the gas here, and that's when we can start hitting golf balls with some gusto. So I'm going to walk you through the protocol now. So I'm going to take my setup position, lift the club head straight up, set my trail wrist, shift and turn to the top of the swing. I'm going to lower my arms and just bring them back up. Okay, now I'm going to sit down and drop onto my lead side. Are my hips and knees square? You betcha. Do I have 80 to 90% of my weight underneath my lead foot? You betcha. Are my hands about belt height? You got it. That right there was a good rep. Repeat that process, become aware of it. Let's do 5 reps. Okay. So you can see that rep right there, I didn't have that pump movement with my arms first because I was connected to it. So sit down, drop the arms, make sure you get into that position where the hips and knees are back to square, 80% of the weight underneath the lead foot. Make sure the arms feel like they drop straight down. What's happening is because the hands and arms are dropping straight down, and you're making that sit move onto your lead side, is that active movement that you're creating from the hips is helping move the hands and arms back out in front very gradually. It's helping you establish a good hand and arm path and getting you set up for delivery. So now thinking back to what I did in video number 1 from that slotted position on the way through when I was starting to let all the tension come out, because I set up with a little bit of a weaker grip, I had to supinate my lead wrist from the slot position down into delivery. I had to feel that little bit of input to get the club set up for success. Now what I'm going to do here before I start adding in the gas in the second step is I'm going to start getting comfortable with changing direction by not working to just a static position. So we're going to get up to the top, and as we start to feel our hands and arms get above the trail shoulder, we're going to start to sit down and drop, but I'm going to go ahead and start letting my wrist turn a little bit, and I'm going to swing through. So it's going to be a fluid movement now. So let's go ahead and get the golf ball out of there because we don't want to hit any balls yet. We don't want any distractions. Okay, so I'll show you exactly how this is going to work. So as I start to get to the top, I'm going to sit and drop, and I gave it that little bit of influence on the way down. Okay, I'm not making big full speed swings. A little bit of influence that I had to have in the last video. So as the hands and arms start to get to that top position, start sitting and dropping and rotate the wrist, okay, or give it that little input and swing through. Okay, so you've started to become really, really proficient with this drill. Now, before you start adding in the accelerator mode here, get to the point where you don't have to preset the wrists, right? Start getting comfortable with feeling that position at the top. So we're gonna do the same movement now, just we're not gonna preset the wrists. Okay, we're gonna allow ourselves to feel the sit and the drop. Okay, we're not trying to move fast in these swings. We're just trying to be proficient. The third and final component, but the second part of the drill, this is where we can pull to finish. Now, I get this question a lot. Should I pull my hands and my arms down from the top of the swing down? Absolutely not. If you get up to the top and you start pulling your hands and arms down really, really quickly, 2 things are gonna happen and they're not great. The first thing is that when you pull your hands and arms down, where is momentum and inertia now in the golf swing? Well, it's gonna be working this way, and you're trying to go this way. It's gonna keep you from shifting. The other thing that's gonna happen is when you think about pulling your arms down in front of your body, you're gonna start to create a lot of secondary tilt. And that tilt creates a magnitude of issues for the low point in the swing. It creates a lot of lateral side bend and puts a lot of compression on the lower vertebrae and gets you into trouble. And it makes it very hard to square the face in time. So what I want you to think of is that transitional phase in the swing, when we sit and drop, is where you want to feel very passive through the arms. But once the arms have dropped, you can start feeling like you're pulling your lead arm all the way to finish. Now, how I want you to do this is I want you to keep things simple. I don't want you to overcook this and start creating a messy ball striking situation on your hands. You want to think about the lead hip pulling out of the way, the lead arm pulling all the way to finish. If you keep the lead arm moving through to finish, you're going to see that if your grip pressure is light, that the lag angle goes away, it gets itself pulled to the low point in the swing, the club face will square itself up. Now you have a swing shape that's got some speed in it. So how we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and go through the whole gamut. Okay, up to the top. Okay. Okay, so I did it all as one piece there. Now I'm going to go up to the top. Okay, so I sat and dropped, let the arms come working through. Now I'm going to add the pull feature in there. So as soon as I feel my arms drop as I'm shifting onto my lead side, I'm going to pull my hip out of the way and I'm going to accelerate all the way to the finished position. So you can see how much faster it sounds, okay? That speed was not something I put in up here or down here. That speed is from that slotted position all the way through the point of contact. That's why you hear that whoosh sound come out of the club. Remember, 25 miles an hour to 95 miles an hour. So it's not fast in this section of the swing. It's fast down here. As soon as you feel those arms drop in the slot, pull to the finish. Let's hit a golf shot and see what happens. Okay, so there you go, guys. There's a drill that can help you build a swing shape that can get your system working for you and have better club face management in it. Don't try to get the club back out in front of your body. Let the club do what it's designed to do. Let it help you. Little small inputs. You learned those in video number 1. Stay committed to those. Couple that back with this downward movement and the sit move onto your lead side, and then start swinging through that and enjoy a good freed up golf swing that now has speed and control in it. And if you really get good at this drill, you can start putting the foot on the accelerator and add that pull component in, and you're going to start hitting the golf ball with some real force in it. And you're going to be a force to be reckoned with on the golf course. So hopefully you guys get out there, play some good golf.